Good evening and thanks for joining us. As Canadians sit down for Thanksgiving dinner this evening, there are many families turning to food banks to put a meal on the table. The everyday need for help is growing, with food insecurity in this country rising dramatically since the start of the COVID-19 crisis. Before the pandemic, more than 840,000 Canadians relied on food banks across this country. Now, some are reporting a 25 to 50% increase in demand, even higher in some places. The federal government has allocated $100 million to the Emergency Food Security Fund. As Jeff Semple reports, some organizations are going to great lengths to meet the growing need for food.
For Canadian charities, this is an annual tradition. Preparing Thanksgiving dinner for the poor and vulnerable. And this year, the demand is daunting.
In Canada, we've never seen food insecurity to the heights that it is currently. And certainly a lot of that is caused by the pandemic.
We're seeing a lot of new faces.
Toronto's Daily Bread Food Bank has seen its clientele climb by more than 200%.
At no time has the need for food banks been more pressing, and we are struggling to keep up with that demand.
To meet the moment, some are reconnecting with their roots. This Alberta lawyer had never grown anything before, but his property is vast, and when the pandemic hit, he decided to get his hands dirty.
The demand for food at the food bank was astronomically high, and it was like a light bulb went off for me.
A seed of an idea quickly sprouted into the pandemic planting project. Volunteers planting veggies and picking 90,000 pounds of potatoes, donated to those in need.
And the pandemic also presents another unique challenge: how to deliver all of this desperately needed food and supplies safely.
To that end, for the first time in its history, the food bank is hosting a food drive-through. Long lines of cars looking to contribute, while others are skipping the traffic altogether, deploying donations by drone.
So for the first time ever in Canada, we've launched a humanitarian cargo drone mission.
The charity Global Medic typically responds to disasters overseas, but they're now redeploying that help at home, flying food along with soap and masks to remote Indigenous communities.
During COVID, there are a lot of restrictions on travel. We have challenges all the time, especially in the winter months, getting supply to the communities.
For the many missing out this long weekend, Canadians are finding creative ways to bring Thanksgiving to them. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
It's the first day to apply for the Canada Recovery Benefit, one of the replacements for the CERB. The $500 a week support benefit is for people who are missing work due to the pandemic but aren't eligible for employment insurance. Many who logged on to the Canada Revenue Agency website earlier today to apply for the benefit reported technical difficulties, but the CRA says those issues have been resolved. Those who are approved for the benefit can access it for up to 26 weeks. As for daily case counts, a number of provinces didn't report today due to the holiday, but here's what we can tell you. There were 843 new infections reported in Quebec today. Manitoba reported 77 new cases, and there were 48 in Saskatchewan. In Atlantic Canada, there was one new case in Newfoundland and Labrador. Nova Scotia reported 0, and there were 6 new cases in New Brunswick. Those newly confirmed infections in New Brunswick bring to 76 the total number of active infections there. That's a big caseload for a province that for months had very few cases. As Ross Lord reports, it's a reminder for people everywhere, now is not the time to be complacent.
What's happening in New Brunswick shows just how quickly COVID-19 can spread.
Barely a week ago, there were 3 active cases in this province.
Now there are 76 active cases. Roughly half of them at this long-term care home in Moncton. 5 people are in hospital, 1 in intensive care.
We've been privileged here in New Brunswick to have had some of our closest contacts with the disease for a long time, being fear and a bit of anxiety when we see an out-of-province license plate. But now the disease is here in our province and active.
In the viral hot zones, new province-wide rules mandating masks in indoor public spaces are being expanded to include the outdoors. The government is urging people not to travel to the outbreak zones, and it's telling residents who live there to stay home if possible. The outbreaks, which include several schools, have forced many New Brunswickers to scrap their travel plans for Thanksgiving weekend.
Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Joyeux Action de Grâce. Not the Thanksgiving we would have hoped for, but still a lot to be thankful for.
The other 3 Atlantic provinces are still reporting few, if any, new cases, including Nova Scotia, whose land border with New Brunswick remains open and has not followed the other Atlantic provinces in applying special travel guidelines to its residents. But the spirit of harmony inside the so-called Atlantic bubble is in danger of being knocked out of tune.
People's antenna are up in relation to New Brunswick residents, and we're, say, cautiously waiting to see what happens.
The next 14 days will be critical in terms of how we see things unfolding here.
A new level of anxiety in a region that had been relatively unscathed. Ross Lord, Global News.